Debrief, everybody. I'm Michel Bryant. Aaron Keller is on assignment. We have a great panel standing by, but first, there is still no murder charge in the case of a Connecticut mother of 5 who's been missing for months. Her estranged husband and his girlfriend have been charged in connection with her disappearance. Jennifer Doulos has been missing since May 4th. Fotis Doulos appeared in court today. His attorneys asked a judge to drop his charges of hindering prosecution and evidence tampering.
There simply is no notice that this conduct, that doing something where there has been no investigation instituted, no proceedings which were in the offing, it is nonetheless an instance where they don't have what they claim to have. There is no tampering that in this instance could lie because of the requirement under the statute that there be a belief that a criminal investigation conducted by a law enforcement agency is pending or about to be instituted. That simply is not the case here, Your Honor.
Constitutionally, right, these claims fail because there was a judge that found probable cause in these instances. I don't know why we are wasting time here.
But I've considered the arguments of counsel. I will take it under advisement.
So the judge said he will issue his decision at a later date. He also admonished Doulos for violating a gag order by speaking to a Greek newspaper about the case. After the hearing, Doulos went outside and spoke to cameras again and was interrupted by a protester. Take a listen.
We don't believe that this speech was barred. The sum and substance of the statement, such as it was simply that he had known of Ms. Doulos' mental illness early in their marriage and that he loved her nonetheless.
But I would urge you, sir, to understand that the order remains binding unless it is modified or vacated by our Supreme Court, and to conduct yourself accordingly.
I just want to say that I love my children. I miss them.
Broken family court system.
And I think about them all the time. That's all.
Fotis Doulos' girlfriend, Michel Bryant, also charged in connection with Jennifer Doulos' appearance, and she was in court today, entering a not guilty plea to charges of evidence tampering and hindering prosecution. So joining me to talk about this case in studio, I have Brian Buckmire, also via Skype, Byron Browne. Let me start with you, Brian, and this is how I'm feeling. Like, we got a lot of foreplay here, but we don't have anything happening. We've got all of these charges without the big kahuna, the murder charge. What is the delay? What are they waiting for?
I think they're waiting for a body. They need some kind of connection. I mean, at this point, we have the splatter of blood that gives us a hint that maybe something's there. But other than that, I think a lot of people are kind of have their hands in the air, like, we don't know what's going on. And I think a rush to a trial might mean a failure for the prosecution.
So, Byron, you know, there is a gag order in place, and it seems like Doulos is having trouble understanding exactly what that means. But describe for us, you know, generally how a gag order works, and in this particular case, what he's been doing wrong.
So a gag order instituted in any particular case is a judge telling the litigants and the lawyers and the like that he doesn't want them to talk about the case at all. Now, what Doulos did, which I disagree with his lawyer, saying that, you know, it wasn't within the gag order what he said, him telling that Greek newspaper or news agency that he's aware of his wife's mental illness, I think goes along with this idea that will come out or play out maybe if he's charged with this idea of, hey, look, my wife has mental illness and she's disappeared, and that's why no one's found her, and I'm not guilty of murder. So I disagree with his lawyer. He violated the gag order. The gag order is instituted for that exact reason. So no one is saying something to taint the possible jury pool, and that's exactly what his intent was.
Yes, when you're commenting on your wife's mental condition, that might have some impact. Brian, let me ask you, you know, they both, Bryant and Doulos, have the ankle monitoring on. So we know that Doulos has had trouble keeping his charged properly, but maybe the cops are using this to kind of track them and gain more evidence. What do you think?
I mean, earlier to what we saw in another case with Garcia and Magbanua, they're definitely going to do a bump, a tickle. They're going to want to do anything that they can to try to get as much information from them. They're hoping that someone slips up, maybe a phone call or a text message, and that's where they're really going to nail them.
Okay, a bump or a tickle. I hadn't heard those legal terms before. Byron, what do you think? Where are we going from here? We have the tampering issues. We have these lesser charges. You know, how soon is this other shoe going to drop?
Well, that's the $64,000 question, right? Just like Brian said, you know, they're trying to get more information. And I think that they're possibly kind of stalling. They're looking for a body. They're looking for more evidence to try to move this to the next stage, which would be charging him with murder.
Okay, Byron, stay right where you are. We are going to continue our discussion with other stories as we move along here. You know, national reaction is continuing after the sentencing of now fired Dallas police officer Amber Guyger. Guyger testified that she thought the victim was an intruder, then realized she was in the wrong apartment. A jury recommended 10 years in prison after convicting Guyger of murdering an unarmed African-American man in his own apartment. Two of those jurors spoke with ABC News about how they made their guilty and their sentencing decisions.
It walked through what murder was, and it was the intent to kill somebody. And that's the first thing it gave us. And we all just did a show of hands, and all 12 of us said she was guilty, probably within 5 minutes of being in there.
They asked for 28 years, and I'm gonna be honest and true. I was like, I can't give her 28 years. I know a lot of people are not happy about the 10 years, but I feel like you can't compare this case to any of those other officers killing unarmed black men. She showed remorse in that she's gonna have to deal with that for the rest of her life.
What his brother did, it kind of helped us feel like we ended up with the right decision.
One thing that Botham can teach us all is that we should all love each other.
Now, some of the most memorable moments of the case came after Guyger was sentenced. The Daily Debrief's Aaron Keller has this report.
Please. During a victim impact statement, the brother of murder victim Botham Jean asked if he could give Amber Guyger a hug. And so, after receiving permission, he did. The image of the man who lost a brother forgiving the woman who pulled the trigger, even telling her that he loved her, led to a massive social media response about the role of forgiveness in the criminal justice system. The judge cried on the bench during the embrace. Afterwards, cameras showed the judge hugging the victim's family. And finally, the judge retrieved her personal copy of the Christian Bible and told Guyger that her job over the next month was to read it, starting with John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son. The judge read the passage to the defendant convicted of murder and even gave her a hug. Then, deputies led Amber Guyger off to prison.
Now, that moment when Judge Tammy Kemp presented Guyger with a Bible and read her a verse from it sparked controversy. The Dallas County District Attorney said on Law and Crime yesterday he supports Judge Kemp and would back her if anybody complains about it. One advocacy group did just that, and a constitutional attorney for the Freedom from Religious Groups spoke to us about their ethics complaint.
And really had this intense moment of proselytizing and witnessing to not just the defendant, but everybody really who was in that courtroom. As you can see, she's in her robes. There are armed guards standing there. It is happening in the courtroom. So she's acting in her official capacity as a judge, and she is promoting her personal religion. So she's abusing an office that belongs to we the people to promote her personal religion. And that was the real problem for us.
The family of the murder victim, Botham Jean, is clarifying that it has not completely forgiven everyone in the case of convicted killer Amber Guyger. This image, which has gained national attention, shows the victim's brother getting off the witness stand and hugging the defendant. The judge gave him permission to do so. The family tells CBS News that the brother did this on his own to prevent himself from feeling hatred, but that the family has not forgiven the agencies, which it believes are also to blame for Guyger's actions. Joining me to break all of this down, we have our panel of Brian and Byron, as before, and also joining us is Segal Blakeman, an associate district judge and a trial attorney. Let me start with you, Segal. Put the robe on. Would you, in the position of Judge Kemp, have done what she did?
Well, I don't want to personalize this to myself. All I'm going to tell you is that generally, judges are supposed to act in such a way that promotes the public's, integrity in the judicial system. We have to be aware of the appearances of impropriety and, of course, be impartial. Now, I will tell you that during the course of this entire proceeding, this judge acted 100% in accordance with those canons. There is no reason to believe or to think that she did otherwise. She handled this fairly. impartially, and she did a great job. Now, yes, she had her robe on. I think what this judge did, first of all, let's not forget that when she made this gesture, that the jury was out of the room, the verdict was rendered, the sentence was handed down, it was a done deal. She walked off, you know, came off of her bench, and I think she was just being, you know, Tammy Kemp, the person, not the judge. She was showing compassion as a human being for this woman who just got convicted, and I don't know that there's anything wrong with that. I think that there's a lot of overreaction to this. The only issue, if there wasn't a camera in the courtroom, this wouldn't even be an issue right now.
So let me ask Byron Browne, trial attorney from Arizona. Do you think that's the important distinction, that the case was over, the sentencing was over, she was really acting as a non-judge, just happened to have a robe on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great thing the judge did. I do believe that there's a difference, and that's a great point, that the jury was out, you know, absent there being a camera in the courtroom, no one would have known what happened. I think we're all a little maybe too sensitive to these things as it relates to this judge doing something improper. I don't believe it was improper at all. I think we need more compassion, just like this judge showed. But I do agree that the judge being out and everything, it's a game changer in my mind, and it makes it a lot more favorable for anybody who's going to be an advocate of what the judge did, as opposed to if it was in the middle of the trial or the jury was still there.
You know, Brian Buckmire is still with me here in the studio. What the key argument is for those who have a problem with this hugging incident is that it violates church and state, you know, the First Amendment. What do you think about that basic analysis?
So I was here when Andrew Seidel actually spoke, and before speaking with him, I was completely in the camp with everyone else saying, like, what's the big deal? And I think that's because we are all trial attorneys or judges, and we see this on a day-to-day basis. But from the outside looking in, when you don't see this every day, you think something is really wrong, that they kind of want this to be very sterile and clean and not having all this kind of mixture of Tammy the person and Judge Kemp the judge. And so I think that's what they really wanted. But we all as lawyers, we know this is true. We know this happens.
And I think we can all agree this was a rare moment that we haven't seen before, and I don't know if we'll see that again. So thanks, guys. Hang around. We will talk once again. Still ahead, a movie mogul will have to stand trial in New York City. Also, the murder of a law professor. A cooperating witness points the finger back at the man and the woman now on trial for murder. And welcome back to the Debrief, everybody. The state court rejected Harvey Weinstein's request to move his sexual assault trial out of New York City. The movie mogul's defense attorneys asked that Weinstein's trial be moved to Long Island or upstate New York. They claim he wouldn't get a fair trial in Manhattan. A 5-judge state appellate panel didn't give a reason for denying that motion. Weinstein is facing charges he raped a woman and forcibly performed oral sex or sex on others. The trial is scheduled for January 2020. Chief Investigative Correspondent Brian Ross now brings us the latest from his show, Brian Ross Investigates. Brian.
Thanks, Aaron. Tonight on Brian Ross Investigates, one of America's great unsolved crimes, the disappearance of former Teamsters boss Jimmy Hoffa 34 years ago. The episode is portrayed in the new movie The Irishman, coming out this month with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino. Our guest says the movie gets it all wrong. That's coming up tonight on Brian Ross Investigates, right after the Daily Debrief.
And thank you, Brian. Now to the Florida trial involving power, money, gangs, and an on-again, off-again couple accused of murdering a professor of law. The victim in this case, Dan Markel, was in a tense custody battle with his ex-wife, Wendy. Prosecutors say that battle was a potential motive for murder. Neither the ex-wife nor her relatives have been charged, and the ex-wife testified with immunity that she had no knowledge of a plan to kill her ex-husband. The defendants are Sigfredo Garcia and Catherine Magbenois. Magbenois blames Garcia. Garcia says he didn't do it. Those two are on trial, but there are 3 defendants in the case, including Luis Rivera. He cooperated with authorities, took the stand, and he says on the day of the murder, he and Garcia followed Markel as Markel drove from a daycare to a gym. Things got heated on the witness stand when Garcia's defense attorney cross-examined Rivera and asked about the presence of another member of a gang.
No, sir. You bring this Latin king back and forth, man. You got my life in jeopardy right now just because. And yesterday you told me about the same thing. Where's my location at? My life is in jeopardy, even worse now, because now they know where I'm at. And that's protected custody.
After Mr. Markel leaves the gym and you follow him, you pull out, when you see him pulling towards his neighborhood, you pull into another direction, correct?
Yes, sir.
Because you don't want him to be seeing you behind him, correct?
Yes, sir.
You pull up into 2116 Trescott Ave, right behind his car that's in the garage.
Yes, sir.
And that's where Mr. Markel's killed.
Yes, sir.
And it's your testimony that you are not the shooter.
Yes, sir.
Is there anybody else that could testify to who the shooter is?
But that's not an appropriate question, Mr. Sanganet.
Was there anybody else in the car with you?
Garcia's in the car with me.
Anybody other than Garcia?
Nobody else.
The victim's ex-wife has a brother named Charlie Adelson. One of his ex-girlfriends said Adelson keeps a refrigerator-sized safe filled with cash in his bedroom.
And I wanted to say at that time, obviously, you know, he just had a baby with someone else, and that's the primary reason we broke up. So when I gave that interview, the baby was 6 months old, and Bree moved into the house, and they got a dog, and I thought I would never speak to him again. So I was obviously, you know, hurt and angry. And
okay. So were you lying to law enforcement back in July 24th, 2018 because of your anger? Okay. So I want to ask you specifically in that interview, did you talk about observing large amounts of cash lying around the house when you were dating Charlie Adelson?
Yes.
All right. Did you say back on July 24th, 2018, quote, "But there was always stacks of hundreds, like a lot of cash in there. I don't know exactly." Agent Sanford said, "Yeah. Thousands and thousands of dollars, you think?" And your answer was, "Yeah." Does that sound like what you said on the interview?
I would something along the lines of that.
Prosecutors played a wiretap telephone call between Charlie Adelson and his dental assistant. Officers went to Charlie's office with a warrant looking for employment records for the defendant, Catherine Magbenois.
What's going on?
If you're asking for records for Katie.
For what?
That she works here.
I wouldn't.
They asked, did she work there? I was like, yeah, she works there, but I don't know what you want. Because remember we sent there.
Erica.
Yes.
Do me a favor. I'm not there right now. And I'm in surgery. But it's not my office. It's my dad's office. So I can't give anything out.
Right.
So, I don't have access to it. I don't know where anything is. I would not speak to anybody. Listen, you can talk to whoever you want. I shouldn't say don't talk to anybody. It's not my office. The office was sold back to my dad actually a long time ago. So tell them that so it's actually, you're talking to the wrong Dr. Adelson. It's not your office. You can't get that record.
They said within 20 days of the Florida statute, provide above cause with reason.
Are they there now, or are they standing?
They're there, but I'm in the back. I'm in the back. They're just waiting for me to come back.
Oh, and they want records?
Yes.
Do me a favor. I'm going to call you from a landline on your cell phone, okay?
Okay.
All right, bye.
Okay, so my guests are back to discuss this complicated case. I'm getting a headache here trying to keep everybody straight. Segal Blakeman is an associate judge and a trial attorney. Tell me, we've got to connect what's going on with the murder to the Magbenois connection. She didn't shoot anybody. That's pretty well established. Did she set it up? How did she set it up? What do we need to see to make that connection?
Well, clearly what they're trying to show is that Magbenois was the catalyst, the glue between the Adelsons and Garcia and Rivera. Okay, she's the only one that knew the Adelsons, had a relationship with Charlie Adelson, and also had a relationship. She's the mother of Garcia's children. Okay, and Rivera, of course, is one of Garcia's good friends. So somebody had to make the two sides meet. Otherwise, how would the Adelsons have come together with Garcia and Rivera? To me, that makes sense. What I've been seeing is that they're trying to piece it all in together. The digital evidence that's been presented thus far, I know it's circumstantial, but the prosecution has been doing a pretty good job tying the three together in whatever way they can. There may not be a lot of connections, but to be honest with you, even a little bit of a connection would be enough. And I think, honestly, the most harmful testimony that I heard, today, I think it was, with respect to Mag Banwa, was all these cash deposits that were made into her account, sometime right before the murder, and then, more so after the murder. And that was unusual banking for her. And then she had, plastic surgery, and she had this connection with Charlie Adelson, and why is she getting all this money? How is she going to explain where all this cash materialized from? And the fact that two of his employees, that is Charlie Adelson's employee or the Adelson's dentistry's office employees, they both testified that they were not aware that she worked for them.
Yeah, and I know that's a huge issue because she had kind of one of those no-show jobs, so there was a lot of cash flowing in. She's going to have to explain. Byron, quickly here, can you tell me, let's talk about the defendant Garcia. Is the testimony we've heard from the co-defendant who turned over, Luis Rivera, enough to put him away? That's really what they've got.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I mean, they got to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. So Rivera taking the stand like he did and, testifying no one else was in the car besides him and Garcia could very well be enough. Now, if I was the prosecution, I wouldn't want to solely rely upon that unless that's all I had. I would want to present some more evidence. So we'll have to see how that pans out. Okay, so Brian, here in the studio, let me ask you this. Let's look past this trial. What are the odds, the likelihood that Mag Banwa turns on the Adelson family, depending on what happens in this trial?
I think Mag Banwa is going to start seeing the walls closing in around her. If you recall, she was given full immunity. She turned it down. I think as the evidence starts to hit the wall, she's going to say, hey, maybe I got to flip and get that immunity back.
And what if she gets off? Then is it the gamble that has paid off or what?
I think it's the gamble that pays off for the Adelsons more than anyone else, because if Mag Banwa is found guilty, you're going to see a very delayed sentencing, and they're going to try to flip her against the Adelsons.
And it just seems like there's so much evidence already built up against Charlie that maybe they're holding off because they don't want to get the whole Adelson clan or gang, as I would suggest. Anyway, thanks to my guests. I appreciate you joining in, Byron, Bryan, and Segal. Thank you so much. And see us next time. Live trial coverage continues on the Law&Crime Network.